West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
We begin the readout tonight with a Park Avenue party hosted by the New York Young Republicans Club. The annual gala, eerily reminiscent of the cantina scene from Star Wars, gathered together some of the leading denizens of the radical right, including white supremacists and ultra-nationalists from the U.S. and around the world. Their president, a man named Gavin Wax, declared total war on their perceived enemies, which for you non-World War II historians was reminiscent of a phrase infamously promoted by Hitler's propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels. The 5-hour fete was a veritable who's who of white nationalism and anti-Semitism. First up was special guest Steve Bannon, the right-wing radio host who bragged that he made Breitbart.com the home of the white nationalist alt-right before joining Trump's campaign and administration. Next up, Peter Brimelow, a vocal anti-immigration zealot who once stated that whites built American culture, apparently forgetting things like jazz, rock and roll, and the blues, Tex-Mex, and other seasoned food. I could go on. And who just so happens to associate with and promote alt-right white supremacists, too. Back in 1999, he founded a website called VDare, named for Virginia Dare, the first English child born in North America, who is a deeply important symbol for white supremacists because she allegedly had, quote, pure Caucasian blood. On his website, Brimelow has argued that America's immigration policy is Adolf Hitler's posthumous revenge on America. In 2009, he wrote that the Obama administration was a, quote, minority occupation government. Now, you might remember his name because Brimelow is personal friends with Trump economic advisor and Fox Business host Larry Kudlow, who took some heat for inviting Brimelow to his birthday party. Kudlow claimed that he had no idea that his friend of 40 years has spent nearly 2 decades amplifying white supremacists. Okay, Larry? On Saturday night, Brimelow rubbed elbows with young Republicans and right-wing political figures, including former New York mayor and Trump TV lawyer Rudy Giuliani. And then there's Jack Posobiec, a mentee of Roger Stone and a Trump ally. Posobiec, whose bile blossomed on Twitter, is best known for pushing the Pizzagate lie that suggested that Democrats attended a non-existent pedophile dungeon in the basement of a popular DC pizzeria that has no basement, and that was later shot up by a right-wing activist who thought he was rescuing the non-existent children. Posobiec also blamed Russia's hack of the DNC on Seth Rich, the former Hillary Clinton campaign staffer who was killed during a robbery in Washington, D.C. His proven lie tormented Rich's family for years. More recently, he was out front in promoting the Stop the Steal hashtag that was central to fomenting the January 6th insurrection. The Times of Israel obtained a picture of Posobiec at Trump's D.C. hotel, flashing the white power symbol with key Proud Boys leader Joseph Biggs, who was indicted by the federal government for storming the Capitol. I'm leaving out hundreds of other stories about Posobiec's affiliations with neo-Nazis, oath keepers, and his anti-Semitic attacks against Jewish reporters. But that guy, the white power guy, was a headlining guest at Saturday's gala. Now, to be clear, these people didn't sneak in. They were invited and celebrated. Let that sink in for a second. Young Republicans of New York wanted these notorious white nationalists at their annual gala. A gala that not only showcased Posobiec, but also Donald Trump Jr., whose lone accomplishment in life is his last name. And also Marjorie Taylor, soon to be former Mrs. Green. Her speech was the night's crown jewel. In those remarks, she denied that she or Steve Bannon helped organize the January 6th insurrection, because if they had, she said, the insurrectionists would have won.
Then January 6th happens, and next thing you know, I organized the whole thing along with Steve Bannon here. And I want to tell you something, if Steve Bannon and I had organized that, we would have won. Not to mention, it would have been armed.
Ha, ha, ha. Somehow Marge forgot to tell her fawning crowd of fellow travelers that she actually did attend a White House orchestrated event to help map out a plan for MAGA House members to object to Biden's rightful election, which just so happened to be a key component of Bannon's much-touted Green Bay sweep, with the goal of overturning the 2020 election results. Oh, and by the way, there were guns at the Capitol. Court records, trial testimony, and accounts from police officers and rioters themselves have produced evidence that multiple people brought firearms to Washington for January 6th, including an AR-15. The CrossFit QAnon congresswoman was joined at the gala by soon-to-be members, including New York Representative-elect George Santos, who attended Trump's Stop the Steal rally at the Ellipse, Mike Collins of Georgia, and Corey Mills of Florida. Her comments and some of those members' willingness to hobnob with election deniers, white nationalists, and anti-Semites should be disqualifying. But sadly, that is not the case in today's Republican Party. A recent PRRI poll showed that 65% of Republicans believe that the election was stolen from Trump. 31% think that true American patriots may have to resort to violence to get the country back on track. And nearly a quarter of Republicans think that it might be necessary to commit violence to save the country. Joining me now is Congressman Eric Swalwell of California and Michael Edison Hayden, senior investigative reporter and spokesperson for the Southern Poverty Law Center. Congressman, I do want to start with you. Marge, your colleague, claims that when she said that had she been there and had she organized the Stop the Steal insurrection, it would have won, she and Bannon. She claims that was sarcasm when the White House rebuked her for her comments. She claims she was making fun of Joe Biden and the Democrats. But she kept repeating the Second Amendment. She kept talking about the Second Amendment. Just listening to her ridiculous comments, it does kind of sound like she's saying they would have upped the violence and used the Second Amendment, which means there would have been more violence against your friends, the police officers who protected the Capitol, many of whom got hurt. What do you make of her and the fact that the man who wants to be Speaker is her partner?
She's going to be in charge in a few weeks. Yeah, Joy, Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to be in charge in a few weeks because Kevin McCarthy struck a corrupt bargain with her so that he can be Speaker. And so he is going to allow under their tent somebody who has this fever dream of an armed insurrection that's successful against the U.S. Capitol. And by the way, she didn't say that she was embarrassed or disappointed or disgusted by what happened at the U.S. Capitol. If anything, she was embarrassed and disgusted that it failed and that she, if she was one of the lieutenants, would have ensured that it would have succeeded. But Kevin McCarthy stuck her because he cannot become Speaker without her. And so the fear here, the risk for our country is that we are lurching into this era where violence will be preferred over voting because the Republicans know that what they actually believe in is not popular. It doesn't win elections at the state level. It didn't earn them the Senate. They had to cheat through redistricting, which will be overturned in a few months to even narrowly win the House. And so their entire philosophy is at risk unless they bring violence into the mix. And that's what the new Republican Party is going to be defined by, is chaos and violence. And we will stand in the breach on the Judiciary and Oversight Committees to defend what we all hold so dear.
We would love to not talk about this woman. I have to be honest. She's not a serious person. She's not a serious congresswoman. But to your point, Congressman, she is going to be in charge because Kevin McCarthy has to put her in charge. And people like Matt Gaetz and some of these, sort of Star Wars barroom characters, because he can't be speaker without them. And Gaetz has already said he ain't going to support him. So it's down to her. And I just want to play for our audience, just so that you understand who this person is. Literally 2 years ago, she was a Facebook troll. There's a Facebook troll in Congress who's going to be in charge. Here she is. This is before she was a member of Congress. This is what she used to do when she wasn't doing CrossFit. Let's play that. This is cut, I believe, 4.
Q is a patriot. We know that for sure.
You are using your lobby and the money behind it and the kids to try to take away my Second Amendment rights. You don't have anything to say for yourself?
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I'm an American citizen. I pay your salary through the taxes that you collect from me through the IRS because I'm a tax-paying citizen of the United States. If you want to be a big girl, you need to get rid of your diaper and come out and be able to talk to the American citizens instead of us having to use a flap.
Congressman, I know that you take your work seriously, and I know that most members of Congress take their work seriously, but the fact that that person is a United States Congresswoman, she was literally a Facebook troll 2 years ago, and a QAnon QTuber, or whatever you call it, and now she's going to be essentially running the House of Representatives. What hell do we have ahead of us with that group and white nationalists that run with her in charge?
And Joy, remember, Republicans went to the voters and they lied. They told voters, we're going to focus on inflation, bringing down the cost of gas and groceries, by the way, which has come down already. And now what you're seeing is, no, this is what they're going to get. They're going to get Hunter Biden, defund the FBI, which Marjorie Taylor Greene is one of the largest advocates for, doing everything they can, to pander to grievances around the border, but not offer any solutions. So our job has to be to show people who they are, to discredit them so they have no credibility, to defend and debunk on behalf of the Biden administration any of the lies that are told, and then, of course, to pivot to our message of putting people over politics and building on the first 2 years of the Biden agenda.
It is Tuesday, the 13th of December of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Yes, did you know that a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world? Well, if you didn't know that, now you do. All right. I think most of you already know that, but I'm compelled to repeat it every Tuesday. All right. Well, how are you on this fabulous Tuesday? Looks like the net is getting closer. Capturing, I don't know, these scafflaws. Can we do that? If you're a Republican elected official, can you ever be charged with a crime? I seem to remember there were some elected officials who got arrested for bribery. The FBI even did sting operations for all sorts of state houses back in the day. I remember Abscam. Remember Abscam? Yeah, the feds came into California and set themselves up like Arabs. Therefore, the Arab. And proceeded then to, some people would say entrap, but regardless, proceeded to set themselves up as these foreign dignitaries or whatnot, and started bribing politicians to do their bidding, and then they got busted. And they went to jail. So, how is it that, 36 people were texted by Meadows? Oh, yeah, you heard about that, right? Josh Marshall at Talking Points Memo got the Meadows texts. And he's been doing his, Talking Points Memo file. Kind of makes you wonder how come all of this brouhaha, or shall we say chatter, about everything under the sun except for the fact that 34, 36 Republicans, House members, senators, types, Ted Cruz foremost among them, were intimately involved in the overthrow of the United States of America, and shall I say, a violent overthrow of America. And so we got to put up with Elon Musk and his anti-Semitism, Pepe the Frog BS. We got to hear from, what's this guy? Trump. Yeah, what's this guy? The former guy. There you go. Got to hear from the former guy. And all of his drivel. Oh, boy. Oh, poor Judge Cannon. You know, speaking of which, doing the bidding of the boss. She gets to keep her job, too. I don't get it. You can get set up by the FBI to take money from who you think are a bunch of Arabs, deep-pocketed Arabs. Oh, yeah, let's take some money from them. But you can steal an election, literally steal an election. Well, they were carrying a sign, stop the steal. Yeah, well, that's what we're doing now, isn't it? But somehow, the people who planned it and were also actively involved, I mean, right up until the point when Joe was taking office. Inauguration day, they were going to try martial law. And they can't even spell. I'm glad he didn't say marital law, because that's happened before. Oh, I meant martial law, not marital law. Yeah, well, I only know what I read. So, how is it that these 30 some odd, 35, 34, 36, what is it? I'll get it here at some point. I just don't have it in front of my face right now. How is it that they are able to continue in a governing position when they were active participants in the violent overthrow of representative democracy in the United States of America itself? How is it? I'm astounded. I have no answer to it. They were able to get that Bankman-Fried kid pretty quick. I wasn't aware that before he got arrested, his lawyer had sent a notice to the January 6th committee, or I'm sorry, the banking committee, that he would be a no-show and was defying a subpoena. And then the FBI, DOJ, got on the horn and said, arrest that guy. And Bahamas said, gladly. We hate that guy. All right. So maybe it's a way to rattle the cage. I don't know. Is that how it works? I suppose if this was, a spy novel, it would make sense in terms of a plot thickener. But sometimes things happen independent of each other, and it only seems like it's part of a whole. I like to think that's rattling the cage, but I don't know. Are these people going to get away with it again? What is it about Donald Trump that I just don't get it? I mean, he even stole from the Italian mob. Is it because he has the Russian mob behind him now? The Italian mob is hands off? You don't steal from the mob. And somehow this guy, I don't get it. All right. Maybe we can get him on his taxes. At least that's in the pipe. Finally. Jeez. Okay. Oh. Since everything is a connection to something else, or it just comes to mind. The Keystone Pipeline. Yeah, I mentioned pipe, and now I'm onto the Keystone Pipeline. We jump around in this salon until we get into the curated part where we have a little bit of order. Anyway, the Keystone Pipeline leak could be a blowout. Usually a blowout is at the wellhead itself, but they had a rupture in the pipe. And last I saw, it was 600,000 more gallons that had been, spilling out into the landscape, into a creek for quite a while. And it's gotten to be a big issue. And it happened exactly as everybody said. I mean, anybody who had any rational idea about what was going on and why would you put it through this watershed? What the hell are you thinking? So it happens exactly the way that had been foretold or warned about. And everybody forgets. But, you could blame it on Joe. I mean, they blame everything else on him that was like, it was things that were put in place before Joe's watch. Apparently, Joe was president when all this stuff in 2019 and 2020 was happening at Twitter, for instance. Yep, so what to do about Twitter? What to do? Now, I actually read something that I consider to be quite bad news because it's still a foretelling of things that are happening now, and all the little pawns and all the little pieces are put into place. Apparently, Elon Musk, his brother, and a few friends control the board of Tesla. So even though the board has a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders, Tesla has been bleeding big time value because of Elon Musk's behavior. Now, this wasn't always the case. This was something that was put into place not terribly long ago, to where essentially Elon can behave unfettered by a board that would say, you can't do this because we're losing value. So I don't know. I was thinking, well, once he starts bleeding money from Tesla, he's going to stop what he's doing. And it seems like it's getting ratcheted up. Are these bigwigs being supported by each other? Peter Thiel is in on this, so is David Sachs. Go ahead, bleed some money, we'll get it back. We have your back. Because representative democracy is in the way of these autocrats, or shall we call them libertarian bros. Yep. Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be libertarians. Look what's happening. Yep. Robber barons, they used to be called back in the day. Robber barons. Here we are. So what to do about Twitter? It's, they got rid of the Safety Council last night, just before they were to meet with him. Now, of course, it's coming out that the 100-member board Twitter council, which goes around the world, we're going to resign en masse. And old Ellen got word, so he fired him first. But, you don't really need a Twitter safety council if you're going to go around and say that the former head of such council, who is a gay Jewish guy, You're going to tell millions upon millions of rabid, murderous thugs that gay Jewish guy is a pedophile and drinks baby blood in the basement of Comet Pizza. Follow the white rabbit. And I'm not kidding. Used to be when you put a hit on somebody in such a public way, you might get a knock on the door by somebody. He did it to Fauci. Put a public hit on Fauci. Under the auspices of, I was making a sarcastic joke about pronouns. Everything's sarcasm now to these guys. They think they can get away with anything because they can call it sarcasm. I'll tell you sarcasm. It's just funny because the kind of sarcasm I'm thinking about could actually throw me in jail, so I'm not going to go there. I don't want to go there to the point where I verbally put myself in jail and also like being in jail. Okay, it's no fun. Limited amount I've had. Yeah. You know the story. Stupid kid blowing off, paper from the government. Well, I'm not going to worry about this parking ticket. And pretty soon you got like 6, 7, 8 of them. And apparently, from what the cop told me, a judge doesn't like that. Really? So I learned my lesson. That was only just because of bureaucratic administrative stuff. I would never want to be in jail for anything real. So I'm not going to do anything that would put me into jail for real. Well, who would? Isn't that what the idea of having laws are about? Modifying behavior. And those who don't follow that edict, what do we call them? We call them crooks and criminals. You think you can get away with it. All right. So now they want total war. Total war. All right. Well, Goebbels said that, and I guess Santa Monica Goebbels does too. Used to be that would get you in trouble. I mean, they busted into Fred Hampton's apartment and killed him in bed one morning in Chicago for a lot less. I'm just saying. Okay. I guess it's because we're so empathetic. Yes. Well, I think patience is running thin, all right? What to do about Twitter? What to do about America? Well, it's about time we set our foot down. All right? We're not going to be able to appease the Nazis. We will not have peace in our time with Nazis. How many times do we have to be told? All right, enough of that. We have a bit of a read here. And I was actually going to get into the whole Oregon gun law predicament. But maybe we'll save that for tomorrow and we'll get into a read on that. But as we proceed further on here, because we spoke about what Swalwell's had at the top there about pretty soon it's going to be bullets over ballots. That's the way they want it. Well, we don't, and we're not going to let them. On the rest of the menu as we begin in the Bistro Cafe of this salon we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, the Supreme Court is restoring the pre-pandemic tradition of announcing decisions in a public session in the courtroom. That'll be nice. An Iowa judge blocked an effort to ban most abortions in the state, and that'll last for about another 12 hours, or maybe even less. And the Biden White House has formed a new interagency group to develop a national strategy to combat antisemitism, just in time for Hanukkah, too, thankfully. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where an independent investigation uncovered widespread racism at the Dutch Foreign Ministry. And the European Parliament moved quickly to strip one of its members of her role as vice president after she and others faced criminal charges over the Qatar graft probe. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link. Thank you, Kelly, for being the monitor of the chat room among all the other duties that you perform around here. Thank you. If you out there in radio listening land would look across the page of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, near the bottom, from the chat room link across to the left, you'll see the link to our Patreon page. And do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. It would really help. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, while we still can, do so at Netroots Radio. And we thank Tom for taking care of that and a hell of a lot more, too. And you can follow me on Twitter, while we still can, at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's, and that's where the real reportage is. The show notes and links is where you can find the real reportage. But you can get to my Daily Co's blog or diary by following the links on my Twitter feed at Justice Putnam. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Okay. Went through so much time in the opening, we have to abbreviate that part, which is good. But let us get into this first offering, and it is by staff at the Associated Press. The Supreme Court is restoring another pre-pandemic tradition, announcing decisions in a public session in the courtroom. Beginning in January, or whenever the first opinions of the term are ready, the justices will read summaries of their majority opinions from the bench, the court said yesterday, Monday. The long-standing practice was abandoned when the coronavirus pandemic forced a shutdown of the court in March of 2020. And I got to tell you, there's a lot more out there than just COVID, and they're all together. It's like a tri-pandemic, trip-pandemic? I'd still be careful. But back to the story at hand. For the past 2 years, the court has issued opinions exclusively on its website at 10-minute intervals when the justices have decisions in more than one case to hand down. The resumption of the courtroom announcements will also allow dissenting justices to hold forth to underscore their disagreement with the majority's conclusion in the court's biggest cases. Major decisions await over elections, the use of race in college admissions, and the clash of religion and gay rights. Past considerations of abortion, affirmative action, and same-sex marriage all produced courtroom dissents. But there was no similar opportunity for the dissenters in June's decision overturning Roe v. Wade's protection for abortion, or in other closely contested decisions involving guns, religious rights, immigration, and the environment. The court has returned to the courtroom for arguments after a pause of nearly 18 months, and the building itself is now open again to the public. One pandemic-inspired change has been retained by a court famously wary of technology. Live-streamed arguments, first introduced in May of 2020, have continued even as the court has otherwise returned to its old ways. But the opinion announcements won't be part of the live stream, the court said. Instead, the National Archives will make the audio available at the start of the next term in October. Scott McFetteridge and David Pitt of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. An effort to ban most abortions in Iowa was blocked yesterday, Monday, by a state judge who upheld a court decision made 3 years ago. Judge Celine Gogarty found there was no process for reversing a permanent injunction that blocked the abortion law in 2019. Governor Kim Reynolds said in a statement that she would appeal the decision to the Iowa Supreme Court. Current state law bans abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy, but Reynolds asked the courts to reverse the 2019 decision that blocked a bill she had signed into law the previous year. That law prohibited abortions once cardiac activity can be detected, the fetal heartbeat concept, which they say usually happens around 6 weeks of pregnancy and is often before many women know they're pregnant. Reynolds argued that because of decisions earlier this year by the U.S. Supreme Court and the Iowa Supreme Court that found women have no constitutional right to abortion, the Iowa judge should reverse the 2019 decision blocking the abortion law. Lawyers for Iowa's largest abortion provider, Planned Parenthood, countered that there is no precedent or legal support for reversing a decision finalized by a judge years earlier. They said Reynolds must go through the legislative process to pass a new law. Reynolds did not appeal the decision when it was handed down in 2019. In her decision, Gogarty wrote that state law did not give her the power to dissolve the permanent injunction and let the new abortion law take effect, even if she had that power. Gogarty wrote that the Iowa Supreme Court decision finding no constitutional right to abortion did not substantially change how the abortion law would have been judged under the Iowa Constitution. In her statement, the governor expressed disappointment the law approved by the legislature was not allowed to take effect, but she noted an appeal to the state Supreme Court was always expected, regardless of the court's decision. Although Iowa's law blocked by the courts seeks to prevent abortions when a fetal heartbeat can be detected, this does not easily translate to medical science. That's because the point where advanced technology can detect the first visual flutter, the embryo isn't yet a fetus, and it doesn't have a heart. An embryo is termed a fetus 8 weeks after fertilization. Brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Amid a surge in hateful rhetoric and violence, President Joe Biden yesterday, Monday, formed a new interagency group to develop a national strategy to combat antisemitism. The action comes at a time when anti-Jewish vitriol is being spread by prominent public figures. Led by the White House Domestic Policy and National Security Councils, the new group will consult with community leaders, government officials, lawmakers, and activists as it draws a national strategy to tackle anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial. The action follows on Biden's public commitment to healing the soul of the nation after seeing hate groups marching in Charlottesville, Virginia, with torches and swastikas in 2017, an episode that propelled his run for the White House. This strategy will raise understanding about anti-Semitism and the threat it poses to the Jewish community and all Americans, address anti-Semitic harassment and abuse both online and offline, seek to prevent anti-Semitic attacks and incidents, and encourage whole-of-society efforts to counter anti-Semitism and build a more inclusive nation, Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said in a statement. Donald Trump recently hosted Nick Fuentes, a Holocaust-denying white supremacist, at Trump's Mar-a-Lago home in Florida. Rapper Ye expressed love for Adolf Hitler in an interview, and basketball star Kyrie Irving appeared to promote an anti-Semitic film on social media. Neo-Nazi trolls are clamoring to return to Twitter, and they have, as new CEO Elon Musk grants amnesty to suspended accounts. The announcement comes a week after Doug Emhoff, the husband of Vice President Kamala Harris, played host to Jewish leaders to discuss the rise in anti-Semitism in the U.S. and around the world. The White House said the new group will also coordinate efforts to counter Islamophobia in the U.S. There's a lot of hate out there, and it's got to be countered, so let's do it. And now let us also get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. Ever notice that some music just really makes you want to dance? Well, a new study shows that it is, indeed, all about the bass. Because researchers have found that during a concert, boosting the bass bumps up the boogieing. The results appear in the journal Current Biology.
Music and musical rhythm have been kind of fascinating to me for a long time, since I was a kid. And in particular, the way that they make us feel.
Daniel Cameron is a postdoctoral fellow at McMaster University. He also plays drums.
As a drummer, you're interested in making the crowd want to move and feel good and give a good, pleasurable time feel. And this is related to the work I do in science.
Cameron and his colleagues want to understand how music can engender an almost irrepressible urge to feel our bodies in motion.
And we knew from anecdotal evidence and other experimental evidence that there was an association between bass and dancing.
So people who enjoy electronic dance music, or EDM, report that the thrumming bass produces a sensation that makes them want to move. And some studies have shown that our movements are more fine-tuned when we're locked onto bass notes.
So for example, if you have people tap along to a sequence of tones, their tapping is slightly more accurate. They're more synchronized when those tones are low in frequency compared to high in frequency.
So the researchers set out to determine,
if you add more bass to music, will it cause more dancing?
Now, they didn't want to manipulate the bass line in a way that was obvious, because then people might consciously decide to step up their stepping out.
That might be interesting.
But it would also muddy the results, like if someone in a drug trial knows they're getting the real deal and not a placebo.
So we wanted to do a subtle manipulation, a very consciously undetectable manipulation.
So they broke out a set of very, very low-frequency speakers.
These are specialized speakers, kind of like subwoofers. People might have subwoofers as part of their stereo system, and these are speakers that play even lower frequencies than most systems are able to do. Even lower frequencies than we think are typically able to be heard.
With their special speakers set up, the researchers staged a concert.
We had the electronic music duo Orphix come to our live lab.
That's live, L-I-V-E, for Large Interactive Virtual Environment. It's like a cross between a performance space and a laboratory.
The people who came to the show were fans of the group. They wanted to come and see EDM. They wanted to dance. And while they were there, we asked if they wanted to volunteer in our experiment, and a good number of people signed up.
Recruits adorned themselves with headbands bearing motion capture reflectors, which the researchers used to track their movements.
And then what we did was just, during the concert, turn these very low-frequency speakers on and leave them on for 2.5 minutes, turn them off, leave them off for 2.5 minutes, back on for 2.5 minutes, off for 2.5 minutes, on, off, throughout the concert.
Now, you can't hear when the speakers are switched on. And based on the surveys filled out after the show, and a follow-up study of the manipulated audio clips, neither could the concertgoers. But their feet sure knew something was up.
And what we found was, by looking at the motion capture data, people just moved more. They covered more ground, they moved faster when the low-frequency speakers were on. So this tells us that the extra bass, these very, very low frequencies, cause more moving.
About 12% more moving and grooving. So the concert and the experiment were a success. And best of all,
people enjoyed the concert, and the more people moved, the more they enjoyed the concert.
Which shouldn't be a surprise.
Dancing and pleasure really go hand in hand together. It's something we like to do with music. It's a pleasurable response, and we show with this work that bass is part of that mix.
Next up, Cameron says he'd like to look at whether bass can help bring us together.
So people are more likely to feel good about one another and help one another if they've had some experience synchronizing their movements together. And dance is a great, fun way to do this. And this might be related to why we find dance in all cultures and throughout history for the human species. It's a fundamental part of being human.
So, to cut down on conflict, maybe just crank up the bass and cut up the dance floor. For Scientific American's 60 Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
This is the story of a very special woman. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician or an entrepreneur. Her knowledge was limitless and still is. She could also make monsters disappear, especially those that lurked in the shadows under the bed. Once, this woman put back together a teenage girl's broken heart, which had been shattered in 1,000 pieces, just by giving her a bear hug. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1924. That was the day that longtime leader of the American Federation of Labor, Samuel Gompers, died. Gompers was born to a Jewish family in England. He was a cigar maker by trade. Gompers became involved with the labor movement at a very young age. He joined the Cigar Makers Local Union No. 15 when he was just 14 years old. He became the head of the newly formed AFL in 1886, a position he held until 1894. A year later, he once again became president of the AFL and remained in that seat until his death.
Under his leadership, the AFL became the leading labor organization in the United States. The AFL focused the strength of its organizing on skilled workers and tradesmen. The main emphasis of the union was winning better wages, hours, and working conditions for its membership. Some in the labor movement thought Gomper's approach was too conservative. The Industrial Workers of the World was formed in 1905, with a goal to reach out with the union message beyond skilled workers. Once Gompers was asked, "What does labor want?" His response still has relevance today. What does labor want? We want more schoolhouses and less jails, more books and less arsenals, more learning and less vice, more leisure and less greed, more justice and less revenge. In fact, more of the opportunities to cultivate our better natures, to make manhood more noble, womanhood more beautiful, and childhood more happy and bright. In 2007, a statue of Samuel Gompers was unveiled at a park named after the labor leader in Chicago. Gompers was one of the most significant figures in the U.S. labor movement.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 33 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high around the, low to mid-40s is what it says here. Some clouds this morning will give way to generally sunny skies for the afternoon, highs in the mid-40s, and winds will be light and variable. A few clouds overnight with lows in the mid to upper 20s, winds light and variable, and then partly cloudy skies tomorrow with highs in the mid-40s, winds light and variable. Pollen is rated as none outside the window here in Rogue River, and the air quality index for the region is in the good range, though we do have an air stagnation warning for the region. Right now, the air quality is in the good range at 24 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is low at level 2. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.22 inches. Visibility is at 7 miles. And relative humidity is at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 34 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 34 degrees and clear. Rome is 48 and cloudy. Kyiv is 30 degrees and cloudy. Kabul is 31 and fair. Hong Kong is 55 degrees with light rain. Tokyo is 45 and fair. Sydney, Australia is 63 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 42 degrees and fair. And New York, New York is a crisp 33 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Mike Porter of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The top civil servant at the Dutch Foreign Ministry apologized yesterday, Monday, after an independent investigation found widespread racism at the government department in the Netherlands and at its diplomatic outposts around the world. Racism cannot and should not have a place in our organization, the ministry's Secretary General Paul Huet said. We are sorry that we have apparently not been able to offer a work environment in which there is no place for this sort of occurrence, he said. For that I offer, on behalf of the management board, our apologies. Civil servants called in an independent research bureau to investigate racism at the ministry following Black Lives Matter protests across the world and in the Netherlands. The Bureau's report said that racism at the ministry ranges from aggressive, direct, overt, and conscious to subtle, indirect, hidden, unintentional, or unconscious, and that bicultural employees and locally hired employees of color experience various forms of racism. In a letter to lawmakers, Foreign Minister Hoekstra said it was extra painful to find racism at his ministry, because every form of discrimination is prohibited, and we advocate internationally for justice. He said the ministry will do everything we can to eliminate racism within our own organization. In 2020, amid the global reckoning with racism following the death of George Floyd at the hands of police in the United States, Prime Minister Mark Rutte conceded that racism was a problem in the Netherlands, a nation that has long considered itself a bastion of tolerance. Hoekstra said his ministry would adopt recommendations laid out in the report to tackle racism and make it easier for staff to report incidents.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Philip Blenkinsop and Charlotte Kappenhout of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The European Parliament moved on Monday yesterday to strip one of its members of her role as vice president after she and others faced criminal charges over allegations Qatar lavished them with cash and gifts to influence decision-making. Greece also on Monday froze the assets of a key suspect in the case. Eva Kaili, one of 14 vice presidents of the parliament, and among 4 people arrested and charged in Belgium at the weekend, a source with knowledge of the matter said. Kali's office did not respond to a request for comment, and Qatar has denied any wrongdoing. Belgian prosecutors searched 19 homes and offices of the parliament from Friday to Monday yesterday, seizing computers, mobile phones, and several hundred thousands of euros at the home of one suspect, in a flat belonging to an EU lawmaker, and in a suitcase in a Brussels hotel room. The 4 unnamed suspects have been charged with participation in a criminal organization, money laundering, and corruption, prosecutors said. The scandal is particularly awkward for the Parliament, which has seen itself as a moral compass in Brussels, issuing resolutions critical of human rights abuses across the globe and taking EU governments to task. Germany said it jeopardized the credibility of Europe. The European Parliament suspended Kaili from her duties on Saturday. Yesterday, as EU lawmakers convened in Strasbourg, the Chamber's president, Roberta Metsola, said she was launching a procedure to end her role as vice president, and the Greek Socialist Party, PASOK, is expelling her from its ranks. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.